All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to, of course, welcome you to the CPS Board of Education Health and Safety meeting for November the 7th. And I am going to take a quick roll call. I did not take a roll call last week. I mean, not last week, but last meeting. So I am going to take one today. And I'm going to start with Vice President Jones. Here. I'm going to next go with Dr. Kareem Moffitt. Here. And of course, myself. So we are here, and we are joined today by our legislative liaison, Mr. Kearney and Mr. Glover, but Mr. Kearney is present. And we also will have Josh Harden, who will present on athletics. And then we hopefully hope to have our superintendent, who will join us, and she will be presenting as well. As a reminder, if you are tuned in virtually, the documents that we will be reviewing are available on Board Docs. And I do ask that any members of the public who wish to speak, you may do so by clicking the chat button now, and the chat feature will stay open for 3 minutes. You can submit your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you want a direct response to any questions that you may have. So first on our agenda will be a presentation from our government liaison representative, and Mr. Kearney, you can begin. How are you?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Health and Safety Committee. Thank you for having me here today. I've presented you with the report and then 2 attachments. So the report this month, as has been the habit of the past few months, lists the bills that have recently been introduced. You'll notice that most of them are honoring bills. At this point, we're in between what is called, the lame duck session. So the legislators are not in Columbus. They're out campaigning because Election Day is tomorrow, as you know. And so the bills that are being put forward are typically naming bills and things like that. So if you would turn to page 4, here's something that I thought that you would like. In the second part of the report, I highlight kind of news information that I think that the 3 of you would like and would be interest to other members of the board. And highlighted is, Ohio has the unfortunate distinction of being the only state in the country without health education standards for K through 12 schools. So this was presented at the Ohio Legislative Children's Caucus a week and a half ago. And so I just thought that would be something that perhaps you as committee members and the theme of this committee would particularly enjoy thinking about. Then if you could, on page 7, just to give you an idea, I know that a lot of people talk about local levies on the ballot and about school funding and why do we have all of these issues here in Hamilton County or in Cincinnati specifically. But just to give you the perspective, there are 121 that are across the state. So that gives you an idea that this is not only happening to the voters here locally, but also throughout the state of Ohio. And then there's some other information about various issues going on in the state of Ohio. Then the 2 attachments are from the Ohio Department of Education. I've recently received some calls about what's the demographic information, not only about CPS, which is readily available on the website, but also the state of Ohio. So I thought perhaps you might also receive similar types of calls. So I researched this information for the entire state, and here it is. It's attached to your report, and it might be of interest to you. I'm not sure. Mr. Glover is here, and he can give you kind of the state of the heartbeat of Ohio up at the State House. So, George.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
My purpose is to simply provide what I would call a political narrative to where we are right now with respect to CPS in the state of Ohio. As I think everyone here knows, mercifully, we'll come to an end tomorrow of all the TV commercials and advertisements and political pundits saying what's going to happen in tomorrow, Election Day. What's important, I think, for CPS is understand and recognize is that we will have a so-called lame duck session that begins in mid-November that will go to probably the first week in December of this year. That is a session where any business that has not been finished yet has to be concluded in that lame duck session. If not, it reverts back to beginning of next year in January 2023. At this point, we don't really anticipate any significant legislative developments impacting public education in Ohio. A lot of that's already been approached within the state of Ohio operating budget and their capital budgets. It will be a mixed match of any number of items that could come up that we may know about now, we may not know. They could be attached to another bill, they may not be attached to another bill. It's simply a lame duck session where those members who aren't going to be around next year will have a chance to vote on bills that they may not normally vote on. Overarching all this is one very important political development in the State House that will impact us and every other public school district in the state of Ohio, and that is who is going to be the new Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives starting in 2023. There are 4 significant candidates out there that have all been lobbying for and advocating for their position. At this point, it does not appear any one of the 4 candidates have the necessary votes. However, that vote will be taken in the lame duck session by the Ohio Republican Caucus to determine who their new speaker will be in 2023. That in turn will determine what other bills might pass a lame duck session and what will be held over until 2023. Looking forward to 2023, as I think most of us know in this room, the most important document that will be enacted, passed, and considered by the Ohio General Assembly will of course be their biannual State of Ohio operating budget. Expected to be introduced in February of next year, and by state law, by state constitution, has to be completed by June 30th of next year. That is the legislative vehicle where so much educated-related legislation is put into, including potential formula changes to public education funding and other items as well. From that perspective, I think it's important to note that we look forward to 2023, that we continue to be well represented and well positioned in Hamilton County on behalf of CPS in the Ohio General Assembly. We have members that have been already past members of the school board of CPS. We have individuals who also have a good knowledge and understanding of CPS and the budgetary constraints by prior meetings. And we will continue to reach out to those key members of Hamilton County, be House or Senate, Democrat or Republican, that we feel are best positioned to help us going forward in 2023. Finally, just a political side note, if you will, or footnote, if you will. It appears that the Ohio State House, the Ohio General Assembly, probably will remain in control by Republicans next year, probably by a fairly sizable margin. With that understanding, it's important to note that we do have positive relationships in the Republican circles, both House and Senate, can be helpful to us and have been helpful to us in the past as well. Again, a final note, when we look at Hamilton County, there are probably 2 or 3 key House races that people seem to be keyed on right now, and you're probably aware of those. One of those is currently held by incumbent Jessica Miranda, a Democrat serving her 2nd term. She's being challenged by former Cincinnati City Council member and County Commissioner Chris Monzel. That's certainly a race to keep your eye on. The other race is an open house seat, the 27th Ohio House District, currently held by State Representative Tom Brinkman, who is running for now County Auditor, against another State Representative, Bridget Kelly. That could be a toss-up seat. Remains to be seen which party wins that seat as well. So those are the 2 races I think will probably garner the most attention on election night in Hamilton County. I'm going to hit the pause button right now and see if there's any questions or comments.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. I actually have 2 questions, but I'm going to let one of my colleagues go first before I ask the questions. Vice President Jones.
Yeah, I generally don't ask about these political questions, but curious, I did know that Tom Brinkman was running for county auditor. And who's running against him? May I ask?
Current State Representative Bridget Kelly.
Bridget Kelly. And then so he's vacating the seat at the state level. And who are the candidates running for that? Do you know?
Eric, I'm going to give you my best educated guess. because all those districts have been kind of rearranged since then.
No, but I thought if you knew it off the top of your
Well,
head, I can.
Cecil Thomas, who is
Cecil
currently
Thomas.
State Senator, is running
Okay.
for Ohio House seat, as is Cedric Denson,
Okay,
as is Donnie Isaacson.
Donnie Isaacson. Okay. I don't think they're running again. Okay.
And the other open house seat, 27th Ohio House District in Hamilton County, currently held by Tom Brinkman. The two candidates are Rachel Baker and Jen Giroux.
Okay. Thank you.
And the other House District, of course, I think you're probably familiar with Chris Monzel and Jessica Miranda.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, so my questions, if you could just go back to your document that you presented, you have on page 3 here and 4 under the education section. Just wanted to ask if you could kind of elaborate a little bit more on how they found the findings from the education section regarding the nation's report card. And then I also wanted a little bit more discussion on what is coming out of the Ohio Department of Health as well. Yeah, on page 3 into 4. So Mr. Kearney or Mr. Glover, I know that with the nation's report card, they're just obviously talking about the learning loss from the pandemic year, and just showing the drops in both math and reading performance. And I just want individuals who may be listening or who will watch at a later time just to get an understanding of that, and also to discuss what the Ohio Department of Health is deciding about immunizations.
Madam Chair, I believe that you're referencing the end of page 3, and that is an assessment by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and it found that 4th grade math scores in Ohio were at a level of 238, lower than the average of 241 in 2019. And then the average 4th grade reading score was 219, lower than the 2019 average of 222. So I believe that their conclusion is related to COVID. I don't have a copy of the report, but I can get you a link to it. So I'm happy to do that. And then the Ohio Department of Health, that the requirement for vaccinations has not changed, or and the schedule for immunizations for the student. I don't have a copy of that report. This is just a citation to what Director Vanderhoff had, and so we can do further research into the blurb.
I just wanted it repeated just for information purposes. And I had one other question. You have here on page 4 the discussion with House Bill 110, and just stating that Ohio is the only state without a health education standard for K through 12. Can you elaborate on that if you have any information?
Okay, so I included this, I highlighted this because I thought that, the theme of this committee is health and safety, and that might be an area where the 3 of you might want to take a deep dive, and you might want to say what would be good health standards, health education standards for K through 12 for the state of Ohio. Maybe what we do here is worthy of replication in other parts of the state. And so our brand, which George and I have helped to spread amongst the legislatures, is that we're innovative and that we try new things. And so that was kind of my thought. So it was something that I thought that the 3 of you may be interested in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? Board Member Moffitt?
I do have a question for you. I had a really great conversation with some young people during our listening session, and they brought up about the bill that's concerning dyslexia. Would you be able to tell me a little bit about where that stands? And I can't remember the number. I want to say it's 600 and something, 616 maybe?
It's not in this month's report. We covered that a couple of months ago.
We did.
So all the bills now are frozen until next Tuesday.
Right.
Right? And so next Tuesday, the State House is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of emails passing back and forth, people trying to consolidate bills and things like that. So we can try and look up this current status of the bill, but it's something that we won't know until next week, really.
Okay, that'd be great. Just a little bit of information. It was particularly of interest to the students, and so I think it definitely warrants some further information from us as well. Thank you.
I have just 3 more quick notes to my report.
Yes, and then I'll have Vice President Jones. I think she had a question or a comment.
I'm sorry, Vice President
Nope.
Jones.
No, you
You
can
can go
finish.
In my political analysis of the Ohio General Assembly in 2023 and going forward, I think it's a very safe bet to say that the current president of the Ohio Senate, State Senator Matt Huffman from Lima, will be reelected for another 2-year term, and that way in his term in the State Senate. Secondly, I was remiss not to point out that one of your own, currently State Representative Catherine Ingram, is running for the Ohio Senate on Tuesday as well. And thirdly, I know we've discussed this before once or twice. I think once the elections are over and we know who we're going to be working with in 2023, it'd be a great idea to set up an informal opportunity, perhaps a breakfast, perhaps a reception or something, either here or in Columbus, to sit down and meet with all of our newly elected and former current state representatives as well. And we'll be happy to help facilitate that opportunity.
Thank you. Hopefully we can get everyone on the right schedule and try to figure out a date. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention for my colleagues' benefit, hopefully, given that tomorrow is Election Day and next weekend we have the OSBA conference, and they do host a legislative session, which is I don't know how long, 2 or 3 hours or something, but it's really, really good because by the time the election happens, they will be able to have a more robust discussion about where all these bills stand and, through lame duck and all that. So I always try to attend that as well because I think it's just it's a wealth of information that up to this point, and given that it's election day, I think it would be great if folks could attend.
Absolutely. All right. I think that is it. Thank you both so much.
One more, then I'm done.
Yep.
When we get together, when we have that session or meeting with our state legislators, that would be also obviously an ideal time to talk about legislative priorities for 2023 as well. We'll be happy to work with you on that document at the same time.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Presentation. Well, there will be a couple of presentations on some topics that include in-school safety, athletic extracurriculars, and of course, student discipline data. But I think up first, we are going to have a presentation by Superintendent Wright on in-school safety, lockdown, and lockout drills.
Thank you, Chairperson Weinberg. So we are just reviewing just a few of the updates that we shared in August from the difference in the lockdown and lockout procedures and what that will look like at a school building. So we'll start with lockout. A lockout occurs when there is a threat. A lockdown occurs when there is a threat to the school that would cause school operations to stop and everyone in the school to take cover. So essentially, we think of those, or we have thought of those as code red drills, or there may be, an active shooter or another kind of threat that's at the school. So it does require that there is actually cover taken during that time. Based on the state guidelines, 3 lockdown drills are required per school year, with the first being done by October 31st. And so all of our schools are in compliance with that. As we do our drills, those drills are posted, they're shared with us. In order for it to be considered a drill that actually counts for a drill, there has to be an SRO that's at the school as well. So we get notice that we're going into a lockdown drill, and then from there, the lockdown procedures happen, and there is feedback that's provided at the school level for that. There's also school notice to the security office that activates the lockdown process. So it keeps us in constant contact with what's happening at the school level. This is also an area that I monitor monthly. I have immediate access when we are doing our different drills. The lockdown drills are one of those, but we do monitor those. So we're in compliance as of the 31st with the expectation for the lockdown drills, and we will continue those throughout the school year. The lockout occurs. So the main thing about a lockdown that's different from a lockout is a lockdown says that everyone goes into a space where they take cover. It's a serious scenario that there could be direct threat at a school building. So taking cover is important. The difference in a lockdown drill and a lockout drill is a lockout drill says that we are not allowing others to come in because there is something on the outside of the school building that could impact what's happening at the school, but there is really not an imminent danger to the school inside. So normal procedures can continue to happen inside the school building. Students can continue to go to classes. If students are outside, we would bring them into the building so that they're not outside, but classes can go on as normal. Classroom instruction can continue as normal. So this is when the threat is outside. Generally, when there is a lockout drill, there is usually police activity in the area. So we are notified by CPD that there is activity in the area, so we need to go to a lockout. And that also means that during that time, we don't allow visitors to come into the building in terms of where we are with the lockout drills. So we continue through that process. Again, school staff is generally notified by CPD, and then they notify security. But again, the main thing for the difference in the lockdown and the lockout drill is if the work in the school building may continue because there is not an imminent threat inside the school building for what is occurring. At this point, I'll open for questions.
I have one quick question, well, two quick questions. Thank you so much for, of course, letting us know that we are in compliance. So kudos to that. I know that this topic or issue was brought up in a previous board meeting and then also brought up again in health and safety. So I wanted to follow up with the question. It's stemming from parents. They do want to know what is the follow-up. And I don't think I got that question answered in regards to when you actually do have these lockdown drills in the different schools, or there is an actual lockdown due to a serious situation out in the community. What is the follow-up to the students and to the parents to inform them, whether it's a phone call from the teacher, whether it's a phone call from the school, whether it's a robocall, whether it's an email? It has been brought to my attention that parents are kind of not necessarily upset, but they want to be informed and they want transparent communication in terms of what happens next. And a follow-up to that is for our students who are younger, who may have a fear about lockdown, especially in the heightened situation that the world is in right now. What are we doing to ensure the safety or the mental well-being and the emotional well-being of those students who do get freaked out by the lockdown drill or an actual lockdown?
So I actually start with the latter first because that's one of the ones that we talked about previously, both in the presentation that we had around safety and in one of the health and safety meetings. And so we have done a better job of following up with students, of letting them know that it's a drill in the school building. We have not sent notice to families to let them know on that day their school had a lockdown drill. And we just have not done that. And I think there are a variety of reasons for it, but it's something that we can actually look at doing. It's really easy for us to do, but I think that it's twofold because it also goes with the other feedback that we get from schools, from parents, that we are exacerbating the calls that they're getting already about a variety of other things. And so it really becomes one of the things that we could do instead of the call is maybe a robo-text to them to let them know that a drill occurred, and that's really pretty easy for us to do.
And yeah, I think the concern, and like I said, I've heard this recently, is just knowing, checking back in with the student. And I think for some of the students who it may affect. So that was just my question. Even though I know we discussed it before, I did want to know if there was anything put into place to follow up with that.
Right. So the follow-up for that is the expectation for that is at the school level from the school staff. If there are students that have any concerns, we do share with the students that it is a drill. And we understand, many of the younger students are,
Right.
they're really concerned. When there is something that actually is happening at a school building, and I think that the board knows this because I share it with the board, we do send notification to families.
So they are notified.
They're notified when there is actually an issue.
Yes, that
They're
was the
not
concern.
notified when there is actually a drill.
Right, and that's fine. I think the question was, how are they notified if there is an actual lockdown situation?
Okay, so if there is something that happens at the school and there is an issue, I'm trying to think of one for this year. We had a concern last week at one of our high schools, and we went through our regular protocols. But then after that, we sent to. It didn't necessarily require us to go on a lockdown per se, i.e. take cover, but we did do modified movement within the building just to make sure that there was some level of consistency that was happening through the school. I always notify the board, and then that day we send notice to families as well.
So the families got
Yes.
communication.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Yep.
Yes, you just alluded to this. I just wanted to follow up on that question. It has to do with how quickly or timeliness of mobilization of staff within the building. And I get all of the mechanics that are required, but thinking also about timing, if there was a lockdown, having to mobilize people. So my question is, are there people assigned in the building? Is it supposed to be like the security person, or is there somebody assigned who then branches out to make sure all these things are done quickly? Because I think, that's in essence what we're talking about, is mobilizing quickly.
Yes, so every school has a crisis management plan. And as a part of that crisis, and we're in compliance with that as a district, we did not just repeat the crisis management plan that we had previously. As I know that we have discussed, in some instances, that's what occurred. But every school has an updated current crisis management plan. In that crisis management plan, individuals that are responsible for the individual tasks are identified as a part of that plan. So one of the things that's important about the drill is that those individuals go into mobilization as a part of that drill. Where we are going to the next step, because we've not, this is an area, gratefully, that we've not had to move into, but we do monitor across the board anytime there is an issue in another school, whether it's near us or not, so that we look at the lessons learned from those places and what's happened with them. And one of the areas, while all of our schools have an identified location for reunification, there is more work that we want to make certain that we do around that in terms of communication, because that would not be a location that we've announced across the board. That would be a reunification site. But in terms of roles, responsibilities, who's responsible for making sure that there is a cross-reference and checking all of the exterior doors, who is responsible for doing the follow-up if there's something that's happening in the building, who does notification to us on what's happening and as a part of the drill, that is a part of the crisis plan.
Okay, one follow-up question,
Mhm.
one more.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, and I really do, and I thank you for informing the board of when we have critical situations in the buildings. I know, like, as part of your communication, you will let the board know if there are, if police have been called and what have you. It would be helpful if we knew on the back end, just problem resolved or something a little more definitive, because sometimes I think I just don't feel like I know what happened.
Okay.
And it could be, I think, it sounds like things have been working out because we're not getting called about something else that happened in that building, but it might be to put some closure to it so that we know police have been there, it's been resolved, everything is okay, and just some consistency in that would be helpful.
Easy to do. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much, Superintendent Wright. We are going to quickly move along to a presentation by Mr. Josh Harden on athletic extracurriculars.
And Mr. Harden is online. He's there and available.
He has joined us virtually, yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Health and Safety Committee. Is my slide deck up?
It is on the screen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. All right, next slide. So we want to be able to provide an overview of K through 12 athletics today. Obviously, that starts with our elementary athletics, which is led by Brent Langhorn, our elementary athletics coordinator, who manages and leads elementary athletics. A newly created position 5 years ago with the support of the board, and we've seen exponential growth over these past few years. We know we can't do the things that we do without our great partnerships. Some of the partnerships that we've built that have impacted this year has been with a group called Be Greater With, who supported flag football uniforms, made a $5,500 check donation, which was highlighted last week on a news outlet. As you can see in that top picture, at Mount Airy, there was a student versus staff flag football game. I was out there. It was a whole lot of fun. As you can see, those kids that were smiling the whole event, and they had the whole school out on the hill watching the game. It was awesome. Also, Cleats for Kids. They went into business about 4 years ago, and over that time have donated tens of thousands of dollars worth of cleats and equipment to help us grow at the level and pace that we were in elementary athletics. This year, they have decided to close their significant donation. When they did so, they shared all of their remaining equipment, shoes, cleats, with our office, as well as a monetary donation of $33,000. So huge donation and support from Cleats for Kids, and Barry Landsberg, who I believe a couple years ago was recognized as a Women of the Year for her work with Cleats for Kids and the partnership with CPS Athletics. Also, Activities Beyond the Classroom supported the ABC soccer program in a partnership with FCC and other great partners to provide an end-of-season party for our soccer participants. That is going to be this Thursday at FCC. The students are going to have a field trip where they head to Stargell Stadium, learn a little bit of information on some health-related topics by Mercy Health, and then they'll head across the street over to TQL Stadium for a fun tour and experience that the Major League Soccer only can provide. And then we see the participation numbers here for fall. Our athletic participation numbers went up from 630 to 890 student athletes focused in our flag football and soccer programs this past fall season. Next slide. As we talk about our junior high and high school athletics, as you may know, the Cincinnati Metro Athletic Conference hosts all of our schools outside of Walnut Hills and Clark. Walnut Hills is a member of the ECC, Eastern Cincinnati Conference, and Clark is a member of the Miami Valley Conference. The remaining schools are part of CMAC, which I also oversee that as the commissioner of the CMAC. Here listed, we've got our CMAC champions for this past fall season, which Gamble Gators and Woodward Bulldogs were our lead on the high school side, and the Woodward Bulldogs ultimately won the championship in our end-of-season tournament. Withrow Tigers took on and battled against Taft for the championship for the CMAC and took it for the first time in many, many years. Taft had run that championship for quite some time. Gamble Gators in our small division won for the first time. And for cross country, Aiken Falcons won the boys and girls cross country championship. And on the junior high side of things, the Withrow Tigers and Sailor Park took home the championship for football and volleyball. Also to note, not on here and not officially done through the ECC, but a city championship was held in junior high soccer, where Walnut Hills boys and girls junior high soccer team took home the championship. Next slide. In a collaboration with Emily Maroney, a fantastic college manager and team, Activities Beyond the Classroom and UC, and the CPS Strong Initiative with Lori Wright and Jack Miner, We were happy to partner to provide an athletics in college event during College Week last week. UC supported us and welcomed over 200 student athletes from all of our high schools being represented. The athletic directors from our schools and some of our AAA pathway coaches were there as the mentors and leaders of our student athletes, which had an opportunity to receive campus tours, breakout sessions with topics such as club sports, financial aid, academic, and living the student athlete experience. There was a great opportunity to connect with UC students, Xavier students, Mount St. Joe, UC Claremont, students that were there to share their experience with our student athletes. Next slide, please. As we know, our student athletes are striving for excellence, and on the state level,
What do we do when we? I guess we can talk about this ourselves. Yes, hopefully he reconnects. So, is it showing that he's still on? I think that would be probably great. Well, it was really nice to hear about some of the exciting things that our athletic department is doing so far. And I guess until Josh is able to join us back, I'm going to ask my committee members, so far in the slide presentation, is there anything that you all see or would like to comment on in terms of our athletics department?
sorry, am I back?
You're back.
Oh, sorry, I was just rolling and rolling, didn't even know. All right, can I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, sorry about that, folks.
No, it's
So our OSHA State Tournament, we know that Taft High School won their most recent game, and will be playing again this Saturday in the regional finals versus McNicholas High School at 7 p.m. at Princeton, and we'll send out all that information district-wide. Cross country, we had two phenomenal runners representing Walnut Hills and Aiken. Our Walnut Hills runner finished 7th in the state of Ohio, and our Aiken runner finished 63rd in the state of Ohio. All fantastic and phenomenal, and a great representation of Cincinnati Public. Next slide, please. As we always look to highlight and promote our student athlete leaders, we recognize those that are performing on their respective field of play, in the classroom, and in the community to show our other student athletes what they would like to strive to be. So we have started the Scholar Athletes of the Month program. As you can see, we have our October highlighted there, and most recently have recognized our November Student Athlete of the Month winners. Every month they will receive a prize from our office and a highlight video that we put out on YouTube and share district-wide. Recently, we've relaunched our Comeback Give Back to align with the Be Present initiative. This is an initiative that we started a few years back that came from a board meeting that Vice President Jones was at, as well as board member Nelms, where we had a presentation of student athletes, and board member Nelms made a comment about the student athletes going out, excelling, doing the best they can to represent our city, and then coming back to give back to our community. And we launched an initiative for those coaches, athletic trainers, athletic directors, and those that have come back to give back to our district. So we relaunched that this year and have had 3 videos come out, and we'll have a video come out on a monthly basis. Next slide, please. Growth. As you know, we've been pushing growth and innovation out of the CPS Athletics Department for many years now. One of the big initiatives that we have, as you can see that picture there in the bottom, is our esports initiative. Very, very excited to have hosted our first intra-district competition between Euler and Gamble High School last week. We had great media coverage. I was over at Euler there, as you can see in that picture, and we had some other district representation at Gamble. it was just an awesome experience to have our Euler students highlighted, our Gamble student highlighted, and the program that we have and are growing in the district highlighted. It's pretty cool. We had a student athlete that was being interviewed, and the news reporter asked her a question if she felt comfortable, and it was our one female esports member, and she said, "Yeah, of course I feel comfortable. We've got a broadcasting class here at Euler," and it was just amazing to hear her say that and feel so comfortable in that space. Girls soccer, we increased girls soccer participation and have a great partnership with FCC and Activities Beyond the Classroom to grow girls soccer in the district, and hosted our first ever CMAC Girls Soccer Championship between Western Hills and Aiken, and Western Hills Girls Soccer Program were our champions. And then through a collaboration and partnership with the Cincinnati Tennis Foundation, who we know are cranking over there at the Withrow Tennis Courts, we were able to start a new program for our junior high tennis girls. We had over 50 kids representing 13 schools participate in a program. We know that girls will participate in the fall season and boys will participate in the spring. And we're excited to launch and start the program in the spring season for our boys. But next slide. And as we know, through athletics, we are promoting our leaders and student athlete leaders. We've relaunched our student athlete leadership teams, which we will be having a SALT conference this year through our AAA Pathway Initiative, and we're excited for that growth as well. But that's a quick overview of fall athletics update representing CPS athletics.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harden. I do have a couple of questions. Either you can answer or Superintendent Wright. I'm happy to hear that we have an increase of student athletes, increasing from the previous year. I am curious, as the students are participating in sports, I know that obviously the physical and the mental is very important. Superintendent Wright, do you know if there's any initiative put in place to really help to reduce any mental health issues participating with the athletes that are the student athletes? I know that we're staying in compliance, obviously, with making sure that they have their physicals, making sure that they have all of their paperwork done, and that they're, in compliance to participate. But in terms of mental health, Superintendent Wright, if you want to just say a few words on that.
Sure. So as with all of our student athletes have access to the mental health supports that we offer in schools. Specifically, we are launching programs at the school level where we're working in partnership with our athletic coordinators and directors to identify additional layers of support that are needed. One of the programs that we are launching looks specifically at a series of activities and lessons that are done with the students around mental health and mental health supports and how to identify what those mental health needs are. So not only are they looking at that from the state, and it's done by an outside partner that has a background in athletics and working with students athletically. So not only are we looking at this is how they can get access, because of the services that we provide at the school, but this is how to do that specifically through a athletic partner that's working with the athletic coordinators and directors, and then working with the student athletes as well.
Thank you. Any further questions from board members? Yes, Vice President Jones.
Yes. I would be remiss if, and I say this all the time, so this is nothing new. I am so appreciative of the growth that I have seen in our athletic programs. And I say that as a former coach and having played competitively in softball and what have you, that one of the things that I think is important for our young people is learning how to be a team player and learning the value of competition. I also think it is as important to be competitive. And there was a period in time when I was coaching here at Taft where there seemed to be this accepted culture of losing that we would get, and I'm speaking from softball with the girls. There was a period in time when it was okay for us to have teams and have those teams go out and win, but have those teams go out and play, but it was hard to win, basically because we didn't have a strong feeder system. And I think I was so pleased when I went to the All-Star game and saw how competitive our girls softball teams are now, and all the growth and development around that. So I am a strong advocate for all sports, but I have to put a shout out in for developing the softball program even at elementary schools when the time is right. And I'm talking about t-ball and softball because that's the foundation of their learning. So I'll say that much. I also really appreciate the Be Present initiative, where we're bringing back some of these coaches to teach our kids. Not every coach is a good coach, but they have something to offer, you know. But I really appreciate hearing that. And then my final thing is a question. So in the program where the kids went to UC, was part of that day, did that include students learning about NCAA eligibility and all of that?
Yes.
Yes?
Josh, you can go ahead and respond if you like. The answer is yes, but Josh can respond.
Yeah, absolutely. There was some breakout sessions. One was NCAA eligibility and compliance. One focused on financial aid, and another was a student athlete panel where the student athletes from UC, Xavier, Mount St. Joe answer questions from our student athletes. And then there was one more breakout session on club sports in college. But yes, there was one on NCAA.
Just an idea, you may already be doing this, but it might be helpful as we grow that program, if we grow that program, that you invite parents to that session. Parents are the ones who have to fill out the applications and sign on the dotted line. And it would be helpful for them also to know what that is. That for a lot of our kids, that's a ticket. So parents should be involved at some level.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Vice President Jones.
If I could
Yes,
just add one more
Superintendent.
thing as well, just for the point of clarification, because I do want to make sure that I do not misspeak. So the additional support that we're doing for athletes is a pilot program
Okay.
that's about 30 students. So there are 30 students that are identified by their athletic directors. So I didn't want us to leave thinking that that is for everybody, and then at some point we're asked about all. So
That's a good number.
yes, it's a
I
good
mean,
start.
that's a good start.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for that clarification. Board Member Moffitt?
So thanks, Josh, for presenting. It's always good to hear in the trenches from what's going on. I do want to make a comment and then a question, or a couple questions. I had the opportunity to come in for the Brain Bowl, and I really appreciate the fact that we have students who could see value in athletics using their mind, and they were so excited to be here, and it was competitive. So I dropped in, and they were doing really good. It's called the Brain Bowl, and they answer questions, and it's it's part of athletics. Also, when we had an opportunity to visit schools, we learned of the esports and how that is becoming an opportunity for non-traditional athletes to benefit from scholarships and opportunities on a collegiate level beyond what the normal traditional things have been. So those two particular things, the Brain Bowl and esports, I'm really excited to learn more about that, and want to just say thank you for thinking of other types of students that are not the traditional physical athletes. I have 3 boys, and they're all you know them because you coached them in basketball, but they're not the traditional, they were the traditional athletes, but imagine the opportunities that we have with kids in a Brain Bowl. I just think that's great. My questions, and I'll ask them, is the work that you're doing with regard to the NCAA talking about the clearinghouse and how students and families need to go about that process of going through that clearinghouse and getting clearance from the clearinghouse, and how significant that is? I know as a parent, I know that's what you asked for, but I wanted to specifically ask about the clearinghouse because I know that that's an area. NCAA is great, but clearinghouse, just a lot of couple parents have asked me, and I'm like, well, we should be talking about that. So they asked specifically about the clearinghouse. So I wanted to ask that question. The other comment you made a statement about there being an increase in participation from 630 to 890. Do you see that increase amongst the girls? And so that was kind of one of my questions as well. And then any needs that you have. I know we have partnerships with the Bengals, and I know we have partnerships with some other major organizations, and you touched on some of those, but what are some of the needs that the athletics department has? And then thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. So yeah, the Brain Bowl was awesome, and appreciate you being a part of that and showing up. I know that just seeing the kids throughout the district walking around with the Brain Bowl shirts and the parents coming up and just talking about that has been cool. But that kind of came into athletics because on the high school side of things, we have academic quiz team. So all of our high schools are competing in an academic quiz team, and so having the Brain Bowl and the elementary kids build a foundation so that they're prepared when they get to the high school. So we're excited to grow that and expand that. And then the same with esports. We're also collaborating with some of those schools that have Brain Bowl on how we bring the spelling bee into a lot more of our schools. So we've been working on that as well. Just another opportunity for some of the students that aren't necessarily participating in athletics like you were mentioning. The NCAA Clearinghouse, we partner with a group called Honest Game, and we're implementing that in all of our high schools. It's an opportunity to educate our student athletes, parents, coaches at every school. The students have an opportunity to log in, see their grades and their reports in real time. It prompts them with what they need to do as it pertains to the clearinghouse. It has videos and information on how they handle and what they need to do there, as well as it gives them breakdowns. Where is your GPA right now, your core course GPA as it pertains to NCAA? What happens if you take this class versus that class? And it also makes recommendations for them to make sure that they're reaching all of their core credits as well. So we're working with that group as well as NCAA directly, and we'll be sharing more information about providing a online session and an in-person session like we used to do with all of our parents being invited. So that's the NCAA side of things. The participation, we did see a increase in participation. So in the fall, just focusing on elementary-wise, we had flag football, which was predominantly for the boys, and then soccer, which was predominantly for the girls. And we did see an increase in participation in both of those sports. There wasn't a big jump in boys versus girls there on the elementary side. We have seen some decline in numbers on the high school side as it pertains to female sports. So we have been very intentional about growing girls soccer and working with our schools on increasing the participation number in the sport of volleyball and other sports. And we continue to work on that and have some grants that are out there on ways that we can be more intentional about growing female sport participation as well. And then on the needs side of things, I think just, continue to do the things that you are doing, getting out and supporting, Brain Bowl and esports and being an advocate and a promoter of athletics. We will continue to grind and do all the things with our partners, internal and CPS athletics, have great support from the superintendent and the leadership team. And so I would just say, continue to be an advocate and share the good word about the things that we're doing. We know that with esports, we have a recent partnership with City Council member Keating, who in the city of Cincinnati is doing some other esports initiatives. So just as you're out there with City Council members and others throughout the city, you just continue to promote all the great things that we're doing. I think we'll continue to do the things that we're doing.
Thank you so much. That was it. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Great information. Truly appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right. We are going to go on to our next topic. And I think we have up next for the second time. Or is this the third? Third.
Second.
Yes. Superintendent Wright with our student discipline report and our data. She's going to do a presentation on this, and then we'll open it up for some questions and comments or any concerns.
So this information, thank you, board chair. So committee chair, this information actually comes as a follow-up to questions around discipline. And the data was broken down as it was requested. And so it was broken down by offense, by ethnicity. We also included all of the offenses, if you will, across all of the schools. And then after that, I did receive an additional question from the committee chair around the total numbers by school. So I also, while it's in this information, I thought I would pull that out to the top for you in terms of overall numbers. So what the data shares with us just collectively, and this is conversation I think that we've had as a superintendent board team, is there is work for us to do around discipline collectively. When we look at the offenses that we have, currently our offenses are broken down based on what's in the code of conduct and what guidelines we have in the code of conduct. However, looking at the code of conduct more specifically, there is really, each year the code of conduct goes through a review process and it's done by a committee that's made up of district level staff, it's made up of teachers and others in the community that are supporting the conversations around discipline. However, looking at what the offenses are, there are just a couple of areas or a few areas that I can identify just by reviewing the data that we need to take a look at. And so when we look at all of our data, over a third of our infractions come from 3 areas: disobedience, disorderly conduct, and disruptive behavior, all of which are very subjective in terms of how you're looking at discipline. But those are the major infractions for that particular data. The other areas, of course, go to something of a physical nature. So whether that is assault, i.e. if one student was hit by another student, or whether it's fighting, they were involved in mutual combat. So those 5 areas make up the majority of the interactions that we have or the infractions that we have when it comes to the data. Having worked with the data processes for a period of time, just looking at the data, I know that there are several things that we as an organization have to work on. One of those is, one, reviewing the code of conduct. The second is how and what kind of processes we are working with our teachers on around classroom management. There are tiered behaviors, and many of the areas that you would see in what would be considered a tier 1 violation are also violations often of classroom management. And so what kind of strategies we work with teachers on around how to monitor those behaviors in class. And then the other is more collectively what we're doing around restorative practices. So last week we did submit a RFP for restorative practices. We're looking for requests for proposals for that, so that we're then looking at how we're doing professional development for restorative practices across the organization, not just specifically in individual schools or individual school sites. This is on the document that you have, but I put it in a way that was just maybe a little bit easier for you to see. So all of this, because there is not one report that comes out for this information, we have to pull the information from our data set and then create the report. This report is just created in pivot tables. And so the numbers that you have are broken down based on what Rob was just showing on the screen is based on the grade level and the infraction for that particular school. So that's the by offense. And then it also shows the ethnicity of those students within the school that had those infractions as well. And then there is another link in the document that you have that says by ethnicity. And it just shows specifically how many infractions there are by ethnicity, but it doesn't show what those infractions are. So just to add a little more clarity there. The total offenses by school, I do think that the totals are a little bit misleading because the by offense is the one that's broken down by school that can tell you in this particular school, these are the number of infractions and these are what those infractions are for. When we look at just the totals by school, it takes all of those infractions and puts them together. So there is very much a difference in a child that maybe they didn't follow a rule in a class, i.e. they were disobedient if that's the way that it was coded, versus a child that is involved in an assault or a child that's involved in a fight. And so we don't necessarily look at those things as the same exact thing, even though there are concerns around both. So the document that you have just takes the first one that shows by school, by offense, and gives you those numbers overall. But again, the where we're really trying to dig into what the overall management might be in a school building, the best way to look at that would be by offense, because that breaks it down by grade level, by the type of offense. There is a lot of work to do in this space. And one of the things that's important as well is we have to, an overall next step would be, after we look at the code of conduct, we also have to look at professional development for those that are doing the coding. Because it is so subjective in the way that you look at it, there may be one incident or infraction that I code as a disorder that someone else may code as being disobedient. And we really have to do some really deep discussions around that. So that's something that I see us moving into in the early spring. I say early spring, meaning once we start back in January, the spring essentially starts for us, and then the backup plan, the backup professional development plan to that. This is work that I've led before, and going through the process of going from a code that had very limited restorative practices opportunities in it to one that was more restorative in nature, but also making sure that we're taking into account the concerns and the voices of teachers, because there are some things that happen in classrooms that it is important for us to remove those things from the classrooms as well.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Wright, for providing this. And I am thankful that you did give the top, well, not even the top 10, but I did want it broken down by schools just to see the amount. And I'm going to say, when I was looking at the, trying to dissect the report, for some reason, when I was opening it up with a program that I had, it was just scattered. It was all over the place. But now that I have it here through this, I am able to see, and I do appreciate that you did it by school and you did it by, of course, the gender and the ethnicity. I will say that after looking at the information, I got the top 3, and maybe I didn't slide all the way over, but I got the top 3 as being disruptive behavior, fighting, and disorderly conduct in terms of, the different number of occurrences for that. And it's also nice to kind of see where our area of improvement could be in terms of our schools, and to kind of look here at the highlighted schools of making the top 10 list, which I'm sad to say that they made this top 10 list, but you have 3 things. I want to just make sure that I heard you correctly, saying that we're going to look at our classroom management, re-looking at the code of conduct, making sure to also look into restorative practice, and of course, professional development. Because a concern for me, especially with our Black and brown children, is understanding of the coding. For example, if a child says something, one teacher may take it as such and then code it as something else, and then that follows that child for the rest of their years here in school. So thank you very much. I know that there might be other questions from my colleagues. I will open it up to either of them. But thank you for the information.
So I appreciate the data. It's kind of raw data. We've gotten it differently in the past, and I sent it to the chair so she can show you how we've gotten it in the past. It was broken down by race. We can do the schools, but there's, even with this, I would be willing to lay some money that there's severe disparate treatment by race here within these top 10. And so when we got it in the spring and we had this be a consistent topic, because it was very, very disheartening. Again, I sent it to Chairperson Weinberg and she can forward it to you. But all of those things that you mentioned, professional development, restorative practices, those things are great. But there is a huge problem. And so we've looked at this data in the spring. I know the email that I'm looking at was from March, and Dr. Bunger talked about it from a PBIS perspective. We looked, they were able to give us not only the infraction, but it was by race, by gender, and it wasn't quite as raw as this. So I'd like to see it, first of all, be a consistent topic, be like at least once a quarter, but more like probably monthly because it is so bad. And then have it be broken down by race and even by gender at this point, if possible, because we have seen, I remember in the spring, it was like, as an example, it was like 4,000 for African American, and the next highest was like 700. It was just crazy. And so, again, we can break those categories out, but I kind of want to see in a chart, not a 715-page PDF. That's overwhelming, but the succinct data in fractions by race, and then we can disaggregate that by school if need be. But I kind of want to start there.
So I do have a question on that, Dr. Moffitt. So with the information that was provided by the superintendent, you did list the categories of male and female and by race. But what you're asking is you want it to be like in a specific row? Because it's here. It is here.
I think what I sent you is pretty demonstrative of how we've gotten it before. And again, you don't have that in front of you at the moment. So when you see that, it was broken down by quarter. And it's just, they broke it down, excuse me, quarter two, 18, 19, quarter two, 2021, 22, and it was A, B, H, I, M, P, and it was, it was by race. And it was.
So you're saying to just pull, for example, for quarter one, Black or African American students, this is the number. For multiracial, this is the number, and not breaking it down by grades. Is that what you're asking?
I think at this point it's so egregious, to be honest with you. We probably don't have to look at it by grade. I mean, that to me, that's your work. But to look at the data overarchingly is where I would like to stay, and to see, like, wow, when you look at this, Black is 5,937, and again, this was 18. And then in 2021, 22, it was 6,126. The next highest one was white at 572. So it was able to show the data is just like, wow. Now we can go into the weeds, and to me, that is your administration, what you do to get there. The professional development, the restorative practices, I think all those are great. But what I'm looking for is a decrease in that aggregate number. I'm looking for, wow, we went from 6,122 and we're going down based on whatever it is that you can talk about that, but we are just the difference between African American and multiracial and then white is just 10 times. It's too much.
And Superintendent, I just shared those two things with you just as a reference, so you
Okay.
could see what she is referring to at a later.
Great. So a couple things that we have done, and this is just the way that I believe in doing the work. And so I'll look at what we have in terms of that information. But I do rely on the people that are responsible for the data to actually be the ones that pull the data. And so for what we were asked for, we wanted to make sure that we provided all of that information so that we would have that information. To your point, but because we have it and the information that was provided to the board is the same thing that I'm looking at right now in terms of just overall. And I just did a real quick pivot table on those numbers in terms of Black or African American and the percentages for the others, and it's not a whole lot better than what you referenced then. And so there is a challenge and there is a concern. I guess what I want to make sure is when we start talking about discipline, the first thing that we really have to do is normalize expectations. Because if we begin to talk too much about just the data, what will begin to happen is just by the nature of the beast often is you find that there is the opportunity sometimes to not always put the data in or put the data in so that it can be monitored. And what we really want to do is make sure that we're getting all of the data so that then any of the interventions that we put in place, we know that those interventions are working. So we don't want a skewed process. But we'll look at the format so that we can share that format back. But I could also share with you the numbers by ethnicity. We have them in there, but you're right, it's in all of the information because that was the way that we were asked for it. So if we were just asked for just the charts, we would have provided that.
And I will say too, what came out in the spring, excuse me, was that number, that 6,000 number is infractions. So you could have one incident that has 5 infractions attached to it. Mm-hmm. So, that's, I don't want to say it's better, but it does it puts it in context a little bit differently, that you could have had one student that had an incident and then had 10 things lobbied against them versus one student who had the same incident but only had 3 things lobbied against them. So that was important to note as well.
Which is also a part of professional learning, of professional development, because when you really start working with training around the code of conduct, you have to make a decision on the infraction. Right. So if you get a child that they have an infraction and the infraction starts as they're being disruptive in class, and then it goes from them being disruptive to them, hitting somebody in class. Mm-hmm. And then it goes from them hitting somebody in class, they hit someone, so now they got into a physical altercation. That's 3 different things, sure. But it's really only one situation that sure. became more egregious. So what is the most, I would say severe, for just not having a better choice of words, that becomes also the most fair and appropriate for the child. So in that particular example, the fight would be the one that should be the one that's charged. But I definitely, it's really a work in progress for us across the board, because I would agree that that's definitely.
And just one last thing, what we talked about in the spring was a designation so that we could see incidents. So is it, from a data perspective, let's look at the number of incidents. Is it that incident that has 10 infractions? And are the incidents consistent? God bless you. Are the incidents consistent with regard to race? And then just, we noticed that there's 10 African-American students, 10 white students that are having problems, but that 10 Black students had 300 infractions against them. So we had talked about that even, and I don't know if that's something that you want to look at, but to differentiate that data, we spoke.
Vice President Jones.
I don't know if what I'm saying is going to make sense, but I haven't had a chance to look at this. It was, when I got it, it was just pretty overwhelming, and I couldn't dig deep in it. And I think part of it is, this for me doesn't really help me, because I tend to focus. I think we all agree that discipline and the disparity that's presented is an overarching concern. And I would expect or anticipate that this is a high priority for us, as this committee has stated. I'm not quite sure what it is I would need to help me get there, but it's certainly not this. I mean, I don't know. I can't interpret this, and I appreciate the knowledge that my colleagues can give to it. But for me, the data is just too overwhelming. I am in full agreement, just based on what you've identified as some of the broad scope areas, and probably much more concerned or much more invested in, are there data sets or points that can show us kind of where we are with this and move forward on that. Things that people like me who aren't data people can really relate to. And so, and I leave that up to you. That's not for me to be concerned about. But I do think, and I am going to take an opportunity sometime, probably over the next 4 months, to look at this data.
4 months?
Take me that long.
Hold on.
But I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Okay. But,
we'll give you 24 hours.
So that I can look at it. But I want us, I think, I'm going to say this for fear of people being upset with me, but that's okay with me.
We're not going to be upset with you.
All right. For me, there is an overarching concern about where does this lie? And does it, I mean, I think it's appropriate for health and safety to some extent, but it was also appropriate in student achievement. It's also appropriate for policy. And I think that we as a board have to really give some thought in terms of our thinking about what our role is in this. And I'm okay with it being in this committee, but then I have to figure out, I'm trying to figure out how this committee can be supportive to your effort, likewise with us, and giving us, and then where does that discussion lie? Does it lie here or does it lie in full board, which I think somebody raised that at the last meeting. So there's quite a bit, I think, that I'm struggling with right now as far as this. Not that we aren't concerned about it, but just at what level do we need to address this?
So, before you go, I just wanted to say, Vice President Jones, I truly appreciate the information that she is bringing to us and also getting the opportunity and the chance to see it quarterly so that we can see the progress that is being made and obviously the goals that you have in place for it. So I like that we're seeing it now. We're going to see it in the next quarter, the following quarter, and the quarter after that.
Well, I just, in response to that, Madam Chair, I don't disagree with that.
Absolutely.
I don't want it to look like this because this tells me nothing. But I also think there's more work to be done to even lay the foundation. We don't know what we want.
And we're leaving it to you.
Can I finish my thought?
You can.
Okay.
You have 2 seconds.
No.
That's a joke.
I think we have to think more as a board and even as a committee about how much work we want to do in this. And I'm saying it's an appropriate task for this committee. But do we know enough even at the beginning? And I hear you. You're saying maybe, we get information or whatever, but then what does that information look like? Sorry.
So I think a couple things from my perspective. This is information. We presented the information as we thought we were requested to give the information. We were asked for specific infractions by school, by the number of individuals. So that's what we provided. I think what I could benefit from is seeing how that information was given before, so that if that's a format that the committee found useful, this would be difficult for me as well. But otherwise, as if I were presenting this data on my own, i.e., it's a topic that's on CAL that we talk about through CAL, I would be looking at these are the levers for what we're talking about. These are the infractions that are causing the challenges. These are the ones that have to be reported to the state. This is what we're looking at when we begin to drill down in that. This is what we're looking at in terms of planning around those things. So, and some of what we ask for, the format that we're looking for the information in, because the state doesn't require the data that way, the data is not collected that way. Every state's requirement is different for what is reported to them and what's not. And so that would be, it really becomes a work overall in progress. What I will also say is once the data is done from this quarter to next quarter, we should not expect to see an improvement. We're going to expect to see more disciplinary infractions. We're not at this point offering any additional prescriptions. Range is all baseline, and this year around discipline is a baseline year for us, because mid-swing, there are not additional, other than the work that we're doing for professional development, working with schools already around AOCs and how we're using that as a location of alternative learning when students are not in class. This is a whole body of work that we will begin to see something differently next year, but a lot of professional development goes into this now, and a lot of time has to be spent around the current code. So I know for me, I'm picking up in the middle of the movie because I started May the 2nd. This is a conversation that you've been having for a period of time, but knowing what happens with discipline data, it does not change until there are some very specific strategic plans that have to be put in place, and it does not happen once the school year actually starts. So at the CAL meeting, that this is one of the things that would be on the agenda for CAL. And at that time, I can present in terms of how I would present it otherwise, so that we know if that's a format that we're looking for, and if that's one that's going to allow it to be more user-friendly for the board.
Thank you so much. Vice President Jones?
Yes, and I'm good with that. Okay, I'm good with that approach. I think what I was speaking from is this information or report is going to be given to members of the full board at Cal. So there has to be some strategy or a method to the madness in terms of how this committee work ties with what comes out of the big committee. And I think what I'm seeing is there isn't a sort of a parallel process. It is, and I could be totally wrong, but it feels like a little fragmented because we're digging deep into the data here. Hasn't been permitted yet. We don't know what's going to come out of the full board or what the group is looking for. I would hope that the committee would follow the direction of the full board. And of course, I think the work that's being done here is going to be very impactful in terms of the information that this committee shares with the full board. So that's really where it's more about process and logistics and all of that than it is the actual data set. So
I'm actually going to change in the agenda here and move up to hearing of the public, Rob, really quick, and then we'll come back and close out with other business. Do we have anyone who chooses to speak?
We do not. We had
Okay.
one, Michelle Kipp, who just had a question about a traffic light, a need for a letter and a need to the city of Cincinnati for a traffic light at Covedale. So she
Yes.
asked if that was requested.
Thank you so much. I actually was going to bring that up, so I'm going to move to other business. And Dan, if I could just ask you to just come up and comment on that. We had a request from the principal at Covedale School. They have been having some issues with a traffic light and their pedestrian safety and trying to figure out how they can better, I guess, find a solution for the crosswalk. And obviously they have a solution now that will not cost CPS anything. And so they wanted to just request a letter of support from us. So I'll have Dan just quickly talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a long-standing issue at Covedale with that intersection. They have long requested that a light be installed. We have had discussions with the city over the years, but it has come down to cost, I think, and the city not being willing. It sounds from what I understand from Principal Kipp is that Green Township may be interested in putting forward some money. So with this committee and or the board's support, we would gladly, I think, support the school's request to move forward with that. I'd be happy to work with Ms. Kipp to get a letter written to the city.
Thank you. So I think what I just need to bring that up to the full board to kind of just bring as a notice and to gain their support. Committee members, what do you think about their letter and their request to ask for support, a letter of support?
I think it's great. I think we should definitely bring it up on Wednesday at our joint CPS City Council meeting as I think as an issue that the city can help us with as well.
Anything else? Terrific. All right. Are there any additional topics? If not,
I think the only thing that I would bring up, and I am going to share it with the board and the updates that I sent today, but as we prepare for our meeting on Wednesday, one of the questions that we have been fielding quite a bit was the question around, as it goes along with pedestrian safety, but it was the question around driver's education. And so that was new, but since then, because it was seen on the agenda, there's been quite a bit of reach out to us. And so having worked with that in a few different places, I have quite a bit of context for that, but I do know the district has not had driver's education as a part of the district curriculum for many, many, many years. And there's some really good reasons for that. But I did just want to kind of share that and put it on this committee's radar. And I will send the information to the board.
Thank you so much. All right. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day.